there's clearly something right and wrong.
Right.
but we don't know.
Objectively, you've been very immoral to me on this podcast many times.
I mean,
Bullied, called names.
That's your subjective opinion.
Bullied.
In my opinion, I'm doing good things.
Welcome back, everybody, to another Two to Ramble episode. I'm one of your hosts, Austin.
And I'm your other host, Richard.
Today, we're talking about objectivity versus subjectivity in art. And Rich, before I let you just go, okay, let's get into this. Let's dive deep. I want to, for the audience at home, to go, why is this topic even interesting? Why listen to this? Now, first off, Rich and I, we love to talk about this, so it's going to be fun for us. So
yeah, it's basically us rambling at each other of why do people like this? This is objectively bad. And that's our conversation today of why we are ultimately right.
Well, I don't know exactly what your opinion is on this. We'll figure it out. We've talked about all sorts of subjects around this, and so we'll see on that. But the interesting part of the conversation for the audience listening in, or for us, is this paradox that exists. And philosophers have talked about this in time, but the paradox of, hey, art is subjective, it's your emotional reactions, it's based on your experiences and how that emotionally connects with you. But at the same time, how can you look at one piece of art like the Mona Lisa and then another piece of art that is a 2-year-old's drawing of a stick figure and go, one is there an objective measure to say that is better than that? We have this deep feeling of, okay, this connects more with me, but this is better, right? That kind of paradox. Yeah. And we're going to just go and explore, is art subjective? Is it objective? Is it both? Is it neither? And I think we'll have a fun time.
I'm ready for it. I have argued this exact point with my art history professor before.
How'd that go?
Not the best. I didn't get the best grade in that class.
Well, what did you get in that class?
I think I got a B.
Okay.
But no, it was basically the professor was talking about how a big part of modern art that we're going over to the discussion that many people don't consider modern art really art anymore. Specifically pieces like, there's an art piece that sold for X millions of dollars, which was a white canvas with a blue line down the middle. That's it. And it sold for many millions of dollars. And she asked the class of, is this art? Is this good art? And said, no, it is not.
No, the teacher said that, or you said this?
I said that.
Okay, got it.
I said it was bad and not real art. It's just image. It's not good. I said, no, it's actually good art because it sold for a lot of money. And this person was the first to do it and is recognized for it. Like you did. Why didn't you do it? Was basically the ultimate answer.
If I'm understanding, your art professor's going, hey, it sold for a lot, therefore the confirmation is the art was appreciated
by somebody. Basically, somebody appreciated it at some amount. That makes it good art.
So
as long as someone appreciates it.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah. And poppycock. I think most art is a scheme for money laundering. But
Rich, that's
a different conversation.
This is going to be so fun. I can't wait to get demonetized by the art community. And then, let's base this and first talk about what do we mean by art? And
sure,
what do you define art as? Because when you disagree with your professor, what were you disagreeing on that definition with?
Mainly, it's So art is an expression of thought in a particular medium. I would say that if you're whatever message or idea that you are expressing in the medium, it has to stand in that medium. The reason why I don't think modern art is really even art is because it doesn't hold up in that light. Almost every single piece of modern art that I would come across and research, have to do papers on, when people talk about it, they go, hey, this is great art because, and then they have an essay on what the artist actually said about the piece and like, hey, this is what it means and here's the context, and they had a whole essay explaining it. But ultimately, you can't get that from the actual piece of art. It requires the artist to explain the visual piece of medium. Because you're in a visual medium and I need an essay to get any kind of value out of it, I would say it's a failure. Versus any other good art. I can get more context reading information about it, but I can still look at the Mona Lisa and get something out of it. There's still value there. It is technically very good. It is appealing to the eye. It is using the visual medium to get across a message and ideas.
Would you say then for somebody that looks at the Mona Lisa and doesn't get anything out of it, that they could say that's not art? Just like you say modern art isn't art. Because what if someone looks at that and says, I can't draw what it's saying?
The difference is, I believe, with more classical examples of art, if when explaining it, you're using the visual medium to explain it. Mm-hmm. The different modern art examples I'll give a more specific example. I'm going to search it out because this was been a while ago.
Yeah.
I'll try and find the name of the actual artist down below.
The toilet? The toilet one?
No, actually a different
The faucet?
No.
Oh, okay. There's a lot. There's a lot of examples here.
There's an example of an artist that basically does their own galleries.
Mm-hmm.
And traditionally through their galleries, they have a specific corner in their gallery that is reserved for religious connotation.
Yeah.
But what this person did is the only thing in that corner this particular year was a canvas. It was a white canvas and with a black square in the middle.
Right.
Or black.
Yeah, I think people can visualize. There's a lot of modern art that has a square or has a circle. It's just very
just that.
Simple.
And through research, like the point being is how God is surrounded by our interpretation of it, and it was supposed to give you the feeling of
there's a deep meaning
all this stuff there.
Yeah.
You can't get that by just looking. It's a black box on a white canvas. You failed at your visual like it doesn't show talent. It doesn't show any kind of skill. It's a thought, and then I had to read an essay to understand anything about it. That's it. Where I can look at the Mona Lisa and say, hey, do you look at the eyebrows and check out the coloration? How is this person smiling? What's the interpretation? Like, I'm using the actual art to explain it and give context, versus a lot of other modern art where you require actually asking the artist what they meant.
Got it. Now, would you say, what if the artists, and here I'm going to get into my opinions too. I'm just gonna pinch at you here and see where you're thinking, because can I preface this with the definition of art, what it says online as well?
Go ahead.
It says the definition is the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form such as painting or a sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. So when we're talking about art, we're talking about things like paintings, could be books, it could be poetry, it could be stand-up comedy, it could be dance, it could be music. All these things are this expression of human creativity in some form. So we're just talking about right now paintings. I think we'll loop back into books. We have more examples we could bring up there.
Yeah.
But just talking about paintings, and you're giving this example of modern art versus classical art, something that you appreciate. So you would disagree with the statement of beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It seems like that, right?
Well,
because what?
Yes and no.
Let me hear you. Yeah. Quick break from the podcast episode to tell you who we are sponsored by, and it's an important one. Displate. We love Displate. We will never sponsor a company that we don't actually enjoy their products of. Amazon, don't come for us.
Yeah. that ship has passed.
But Displate, we're here for you.
Yeah.
They have an offer for all of you out there. 22% off for 1 to 2 Displates and 33% off for 3 Displates. And what are these things? Well, we're going to show you.
This is Displate. This is an upgrade from your shabby college, terrible movie poster. Get a nice premium metal one. This way you can actually show off your favorite poster and favorite art. A big problem with posters is often the corners peeling up. You have to put it in a fancy frame.
These things go onto the wall super easy. You just put a magnet on the back, stick it onto your wall.
Instead of having to take things off the wall and store them, these attach with magnets to the wall, and you just swap them whenever you want.
And we have cool ones in my room, at your office. One's behind the studio here of The Way of Kings. You can get the book cover of The Way of Kings on a Displate and hang it anywhere you want near your bookshelf.
Get a Displate. They look great. Spice up your room.
Look at these designs. They're endless. They have Warhammer designs. Freaking Sauron. Lord of the Rings stuff.
That is Sauron. Okay, I wanted to make sure that wasn't the one before, but yes, it is Sauron.
Go check out Displate, link in the description below, or use the code 2TORAMBLE at discount to get 22 to 33% off.
And you're supporting the channel. Thank you. And back to the episode. eye of the beholder, specifically eye there. If you are if you are doing a visual piece of art, it needs to be pleasing and it needs to come across. You need to convey your message in a visual medium, not text. If your art requires an essay, it's not very good. Like that is basically it. That applies to almost every form of art in my standing. So if I'm watching your movie, and there's no way for me to understand it other than reading an essay about it, it failed.
Now, would you say that, so that same art piece, that square thing, which, hey, I don't like modern art. I can't defend the, like, oh, this is what it means, because I'm not an artist at all. But with something like modern art, let's say someone looks at that painting that you said, it's not, I have to read the explanation to understand what the art actually is. What if someone sees that black circle and goes, you know what, this represents God, and the whatever the explanation was, this represents God and how the infinite universe and how the pressure comes on us. What if they glean that from it because they interpret it and they get that feeling out of it? Does it make it art?
It's possible. The fact that it doesn't appeal, I don't think it's going to get that message across to many people. Maybe to that one person it is, but
does that make it subjective?
Yeah, it certainly is. I just, in my own head, I kind of have an objective standard of I do believe that if you can't get your message across in the medium that you chose, then it's failed.
So you're subjectively objective standards in that
exactly
way. Because I get you, because if you don't mind me throwing out
why I'm frustrated with other things, and when someone says, oh, it's great because, and I'll go back to movies and books and things. Of when people are upset by Star Wars stuff, of things in the canon, people are upset by some plot hole, some plot convenience, and something doesn't make sense. And then someone who's a big fan of the Star Wars lore goes, well, actually, in the extended universe, blah, 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 blah. And I'm going, that's extra context that that's not here. The movie needs to stand on its own. It's its own art piece. And also that extended universe stuff was made after the fact to postscript try to fix it. It doesn't make the movie better. The movie still failed on its own.
Okay, so in this whole talk, it seems like you're trying to grapple with the fact that there are things that I think have an objective standard that are wrong. But
and art is trying to do something.
You're setting up rules in your head to why this is bad.
Yeah, I'm trying to get across of why I feel bad about most other art pieces. That if your art cannot stand on its own and can't get across value on its own, then it's failed.
Okay, so using that standard then, so to define what we mean by subjective or objective as well, the subjective is based on personal perspective, bias, and feelings. Yeah. It takes the individual. You glean something out of it yourself. And objective, we're talking about expression and dealing with facts and verifiable information, not based on personal viewpoint at all. So when you're setting up these standards, when we're talking about art as subjective or objective, you're still going, these are rules I'm creating, but they're your rules. Or will you make the step to go, they should be rules, they ought to be rules, because beauty, there's an objective standard for something that's beautiful, or the art that is great. Would you make that claim?
Have always been rules. If you are expressing yourself in a certain medium, you are trying to make yourself, you're trying to be understood, or at least get your message across through that medium. If you do something, if you read a poem and no one understands it, no one gets it, it's complete gobbledygook, and someone says, what does that mean? And then you give an explanation to go, oh, I didn't understand that at all, but okay, fair enough. I guess it makes sense now that you explained it. You kind of failed. You need, it's like, maybe I should have expressed myself better so I can be understood. If no one understands your point, that's the point of the medium, is to get your point across.
What you're doing right now is literally art, because I understand you crystal clear. I totally get your viewpoint.
Now, to be a caveat, every individual going into art, often art is being based off of references of things that some people may not know. And that person just doesn't understand it because they don't get the references, they don't understand the historical context. Like if a piece of art is representative of some massacre in history, and that person just doesn't know that. it's not really the artist's fault because they're expressing something specifically. But going back through the evidence, given all the context, you can look back and say, did they do a good job of actually getting the message to a reasonable degree for an audience member that they're kind of going for? That you can look into that to an objective standard.
So did they achieve the goal of the medium?
Basically.
That's your objective standard.
Yeah.
Right. And now to narrow back, let's talk more books too, because the art example I'm less familiar with. I don't know about you, but modern art versus classic, I'm just not as well versed in art as well. So books, for example, you look at a book such as Lord of the Rings, and you look at these classics, these books that you would think, okay, this is better than Akatar. Maybe. Because just to use extremes, let's use a worse example than that, because Akatar is really well loved, it's very popular. A lower example of an indie book that was published from a first-time author this year, and they're 7 years old. Okay, let's use that extreme of an example. So Lord of the Rings versus that. It seems what you're getting at.
I have a good uncontroversial one.
Okay. What is
it? There are novels based on Minecraft characters that sell actually really well.
That's my favorite novel. What do you mean? That's
I don't. Someone sent it to us. Yeah. It's hilariously bad, but it's written by a young kid. He's just right. Like,
sure,
fair enough. Everyone's got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
No offense, but Lord of the Rings is better than that.
I think Lord of the Rings is a little better than Steve. Just
a little better than Steve. Steve from Minecraft.
Now, right, getting at that, talking about those two extremes, this whole conversation is just going, okay, yes, one can make you feel a certain way, because what if we were to use this example? I'm gonna curve and turn and teeter and totter all these ways, because if we're talking about the Mona Lisa, if we're talking about a book like Lord of the Rings versus what if it's a book that my 5-year-old kid wrote me in a card, a 2-chapter book, or it was like how much they love you, Dad and Mom, and all this, right?
Yeah.
Now, which one is better? Which one's more meaningful to you? What's your standard that you use, and what words do you use to go Lord of the Rings versus the one that emotionally connects more to you? Which one is better? Now, do you use different words there? What would you say? Is one better or worse?
Apply that exact same definition of you're trying to accomplish your medium's goal. A kid that makes a piece of art for their mom and dad and makes them feel happy and loved and all these things. That whole medium, the purpose of the art was to make their parents feel happy, loved, and all these things, and it succeeded. There we go. That's successful art to the audience of 2.
Mm-hmm. So you would say then that in that context, that 5-year-old writing that could be better art than Lord of the Rings. In that context, to that person's subjective viewpoint.
To those 2 people, yes, it is.
Okay.
But when you're releasing art to larger context, it's a lot easier to compare apples to apples, because the art is meant for everyone. If the art is meant for everyone, that's part of it. If it's meant for everyone, then you compare another piece of art that is meant for everyone, or it's meant for this certain group of people. And so what is the art trying to accomplish, and did it succeed or fail?
Well, then let's push even further into that and go, okay, succeeding or failing, and let's say it's a larger, broader audience. So Lord of the Rings versus a way lesser version, a indie published book, but it draws in on loss, and someone just lost someone recently. Versus maybe Lord of the Rings doesn't hit on that one note as much. So if a book such as that connects more with that, maybe even more people, because it's something that happened maybe in the world at that time. Something in the world was happening at this phase of time, and it connected with a bunch of people. Does that change it as well? Is there a way to measure for you why Lord of the Rings is still better than that, or why this art piece is better than that? What would that be for you?
Well, we kind of have our own figured out where we try to add objective benchmarks or standards to our subjective opinions. We subjectively say we value these 5 things in a book, and so we measure those and compare that to our own subjective opinions again of how did this make us feel? Do we think this is better than that? And that's kind of how we judge it. Other people, it's hard to say. I think when you're it's really hard to talk about someone's like favorite versus the best. Someone's favorite book is typically something like, hey, this book was read to me by my mother. My mother read me this book and it meant so much to me. Or, hey, my father and I used to talk about this book. It was our favorite series growing up. It's my favorite. The best, though, normally implies a competition between others and like the demonstration of skill. That's where we start getting, I think, a lot more objectively. Like if you have poor grammar in your book, it's a demonstration of poor skill. So that's an objective factor that you have to go with. I would say being able to do multiple things at once, being concise, making characters that feel believable, live off the page. Like all of these factors are a demonstration of skill. And I think that's where we're starting to get to a bit more objectivity.
You're getting closer to what I think now. I think we're going to get to an agreement by the end of this.
Okay. Well, then what do you think?
You're getting closer to exactly what I think, where an example I like to use is films and lighting techniques, or a way of filmmaking and directing, where I have a few examples written down here of, hey, which film has a better use of lighting techniques, like these specific techniques, or which song uses more notes in a more complex order, or which character has a character arc, which has more character arc beats, or which plot has more, whatever question you want to insert there for ask the question toward the plot or ask the question toward the lighting and design of it. So I think there's objective things you can look at if you're looking at a specific measure for the art. So
who's to say that specific measure is worth being objectively measured? Like, why is that value? It's the whole thing of it actually goes back to the two terms of morality. There's basically utilitarian argument of morality, or a consequentialism versus consequentialism versus what else is it? It's
utilitarianism, or
no, the opposite of consequentialism, of basically it's right because it's right.
More absolutism. No,
in comments you can help me out, but point being of
Kant, Immanuel Kant's.
No.
Anyway, yeah.
Someone will correct me.
Okay,
it's fine. But if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The whole idea of consequentialism is the idea that nothing is right on its own sake. It's only right if it leads to a good outcome. So the outcomes are the only thing that matters. However, and so it's trying to get away from the more religious context of, this is bad because it's bad. The rules say it's bad. That things are only bad and good because of their outcome.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that argument ultimately comes down to, what do you value as a good outcome? What do you value as a bad outcome? That's subjective again. Like, you start going into just a spiral of like, oh, well, this is good because it leads to the, less dead people. It's like, why do you value less dead people? That's honestly your opinion. Other people could say, I actually want more dead people of this certain group. And so to them, that's a good outcome.
Moral subjectivity versus objectivity. Where do you draw it?
There is no objectivity in it. You could cycle back endlessly. There's no way to actually lock that down. Anyone that says
religion,
you can logic, that's
so
the thing.
Religion then has this, yeah.
But then that gets back to, I don't believe anyone. When anyone says like, oh yeah, things are completely subjective, I find that just to be a complete lie, because people don't act that way. With art, going like, hey, all art is subjective, and then you show them two pictures and go like, which one's better? They go, well, obviously that one. It's like, clearly it's not completely subjective. You're not living in a neutral world of just everything's the same, nothing matters. Bullshit.
You're talking about something that Immanuel Kant, that's why I was bringing him up. He did talk exactly about this, and how in his book, The Critique of Judgment, he was looking at art and seeing why it was he saw it as inherently subjective. And this is what he talks about. Maybe it's similar to what you're getting at, where he says, taste is subjective. You must be unbiased to judge beauty. And he came to this conclusion of subjective universality. Subjective universality, meaning we can't prove something is beautiful, but we have good reason to believe that other people ought to think so. That what you're getting at, maybe it's not an objective matter, but universally, It's subjective universality, which another philosopher, David Hume, talks in his book Of the Standard of Taste. He was addressing this very paradox we're talking about, where, hey, everyone knows taste is subjective, but this is better than this. Why is that? How can those coexist? And what he was talking about was, he says in quotes, beauty is no quality in things themselves. It exists merely in the mind which contemplates them, and each mind perceives a different beauty, essentially beauty in the eye of the beholder. But when he went to explain this and how the extremes can exist, he said, how can there be standards? Well, strong sense, united in delicate sentiment, improved by practice, perfected by comparison, and cleared of all prejudice, can alone entitle critics to this valuable character, and the joint verdict of such, wherever they are to be found, is the true standard of taste and beauty. Essentially saying that we can't know what's good for sure, but we can get close over basically a consensus. So what they're getting at is this, yes, of course that's better than this. What you're just talking about there is maybe the word isn't objective, but it's subjective universality, because we can all get there through certain rule frameworks in our head, because we all value certain techniques. So when we're looking at a film that has all these, does 100 things better than this other film does, we can get to a subjective universality of 99% of people will say that's better than that. What do you think about that? Is that a term you'd agree with? Maybe instead of saying objective, subjective universality.
I would actually agree with that, because it kind of comes back to what I believe on morality of like I believe there is a right and wrong. We just don't know it. And we find out ever closer by talking and like the universality of figuring it out. There's clearly something right and wrong.
Right. Objectively, you've been very immoral to me on this podcast many times. I mean, bullied, called names.
That's your subjective opinion.
Bullied.
In my opinion, I'm doing good things. I'm doing the right thing and prodding you on the path to greatness.
You both want, so assuming life is valuable, mine isn't, though, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
And
no.
Secondly,
all life but yours is valuable. That has been my experience.
Because through trial and error, just like David Hume was saying, through the trial and error of going through step by step of, okay, strong sense, delicate sentiment, and improved by practice and perfected by comparison. You've compared me to others.
I've compared you to others.
You've practiced. We've had conversations. You've gone, it's useless.
Exactly.
So you can get to any conclusion. This is a dangerous line. Because, man, I hope the viewers don't mind this. We can talk about morality too, and just how...
Well, it ties so closely together.
Ties in,
when someone, because there's a cognitive dissonance in people's minds when someone looks at, let's say, The Room and goes like, "Oh yeah, The Room is the best movie ever." Everyone goes like, "How the hell do you think?"
Caveat. Hold on. Well, caveat, because there's two movies. There's a movie called Room with Brie Larson. It's based on a book, and I know it's a good movie. You're talking about The Room with Tommy Wiseau.
Yes,
the cult classic.
Yes.
You're talking about that one.
People love it because it's so bad.
Yeah.
It's enjoyable for that reason. It was not intended
Does that make it art?
It wasn't intended to, but people liked it anyway. That's the thing. People can like things that are bad. It's perfectly acceptable.
Well, like modern art, then going back to your first point of if just one person likes it, is it art? Sorry, I want to let you finish your point though, and not bring you back to that. Yeah, your point
being is you can look at that and the people that go like, why do you think this is good? And people just don't understand it.
Right.
Just because those people exist doesn't mean the universality of it. I like the idea of you can kind of come to a general consensus by taking a bunch of reasons and you get close to what the truth is, but you'll never actually get there. And there'll always be outliers and people that maybe just see a different way, but ultimately.
Because the few people that don't like this podcast, those little Kremlins out there.
Exactly.
The masses who come here.
I don't like the way you put that. Ugh, gross. Ugh.
Democracy is what?
It is so cringe.
Wait, so hold on.
Buy our sweatshirt.
Your very t-shirt, and you're saying on this, it's plastered over all of our merch, democracy is cringe. You're saying you agree with the subjective universality. Let me get this right.
It's the degree on where things go. It's the flow of information.
Seems like cope.
I'm not right because the masses agree.
The masses are right because they agree with you.
Exactly.
You son of a bitch, you did
That's the way. It's confirmation.
You little
That's all it is.
you mental gymnastic genius. You dirty dog. So, yeah, touching on that point of subjective universality, why we all feel like something is better than the other, it gets a lot tougher in the gray area of where two things are generally good or in the same ballpark. Because when we talk about books and The Sword of Kaigan or Dune, just to bring up two books that I know we like a lot.
Very good.
How do you look at
you?
Yeah, the one person could rate one a 10, one could give it a 4. Like, people could just not like it or not connect with it. That's just very true. It gets more difficult when there's the less extremes, because when we're talking about a book that is just a classic and 1984, something that's influenced a lot, or talk about any Jane Austen book, etc., Handmaid's Tale, etc. Just name a classic and then compare that to indie author that's first time, just published, whatever. It's very easy to make that distinction. But then when you go in between the lines, that's where it just becomes so clear that, hey, that subjective universality, like, you can't find out of 100 people, 50 people will 50 people say that, 50 people say that.
I think a lot of that comes down to people just don't understand each other. And when someone says, like, I didn't like it, and often people give reasons that don't really seem like very good reasons. You look at reviews for some books and you go like, did you even read the book? And it doesn't make sense.
Sure, people have thought that on here.
Yeah, no,
that's a few times they've been like, oh, these kids.
It's not that people dislike something, it's that they can't understand why. Like, I've heard opinions where people disagree with me. I'm like, fair enough. I understand where they're coming from and it makes sense in my head. And then other times where I'm like, how do you come to that conclusion? That's just nonsense. Like, your thought process is wrong.
Because you guys don't agree on the premise.
We don't agree on basically our definitions on what we're actually judging it on. And that's ultimately, when we say good and bad, everyone has their own opinions on what is good, what is bad.
What is right, what is wrong.
People can come from different backgrounds. Like, I know my own mother, of what she looks for in a good book. And from her own experience, what she likes and she doesn't like. She doesn't particularly like gray characters. She doesn't like the type of just bang, bang, shoot 'em up action. It's not what she enjoys. She doesn't get enjoyment out of it. I think that's
we had a whole video dedicated on how your mom said, why are your stupid fantasy books this long? Why do you like that crap? And we do like it. Sorry.
Like it. But to her, so as long as that definition is clear of what she thinks is good, what she thinks is bad, then we can kind of come to a consensus of, I can go, hey, you would think this is bad, so try this. You would think this is good. It's a lot harder when we're getting down to the universal stuff.
And talking about that granular thing of, let's say your mom says, hey, I don't like that book because it's 1,000 pages. I'm not going to read it. On that objective measure of it being 1,000, you're correct that it's 1,000 pages.
It's that, right? Why do you value the 1,000 pages?
It's why is that your premise, right? And it's a totally okay premise to have, whether you like the long book or the short book. Fair enough. So when you get you can get an objective. You can make an objective statement about a specific aspect of it, but the subjectivity comes from what aspects do I care about and pull to form my opinion.
I think that's what's important for discussion, specifically for reviewers, of when you're dealing with a larger sample size.
Yeah.
So if I'm only talking about what I think and what I believe, and I'm just comparing, like, do I like this? I can explain my reasons.
Yeah.
If I'm trying to compare books to across the mediums, I have to have some type of standard on which people can understand my thought process.
Yeah.
And that's where people get upset, is they just don't understand your thought process. The fact that we have our 5 categories.
I was going to say, this is a good time to talk about the 5 categories with our entire point with this, and correct me if I'm wrong with how you use our rating system. People have been here. When we rate books, we talk an hour long on this podcast, and we just like to nerd out and get specific about what we liked, what we didn't like about the book. Now, of course, anything that we rate, our 5 categories, what we have is emotional impact as the first one. And how I like to look at it is that emotional impact category is my subjective opinion, like what I thought about the book. It connected with me. It didn't. The message hit. The message didn't. We throw that in there. Now, all the other categories we have, like plot, characters, dialogue, prose, world building. We're not saying that, hey, a book has to have a Lord of the Rings world to be a 10 out of 10. We're not saying that the book the dialogue prose has to be Patrick Ruffus, whatever your measure is of what makes those good or bad. We'll get to that in a second. But my point being, of all those categories, we're just saying these are aspects of a book that we're subjectively picking. We're saying that plot is a thing that is universal in a lot of books, and we're going to look at that and see why we like the plot or don't. Dialogue prose is in every book. We're going to see why it's good or bad. And of course, it comes from our subjective opinions of what makes good prose, what makes bad prose.
And like to your point you're bringing up, it comes from comparison and experience. We are comparing it to other things of like, hey, this was
did
better
this better
than this.
This did this. Exactly. And then going through world building or going through characters of, hey, why does this character connect in this book? Why doesn't it connect here? Now, all we're saying with that measure, when we give our out of 10 score, how I like to look at it, you said this earlier in the pod, of what's my favorite book. I would say I look at our emotional impact. Of my favorite book are the ones I gave like 10s out of 10s for emotion and they connected with me. What do I think is the best made book? I would look at our total category. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody else out there, like, here's the objective score. I know we like to joke at times that our rating is objective, which...
Yeah, jokes.
I was also going to double down and say they're not. It is true. It's subjective, right? But what our total score when we're adding all those categories. How I feel about the book is the emotional impact. The total category, and I've messed up with this in the past. Like I've let my emotional bias let me raise other categories or lower other categories. You can't disconnect yourself. And we try to as we review more. We'll get better and better at that. But the other categories we look at are our subjective choices of going, this is what we're going to look at for seeing if a book's good or not, and this and this and this.
And
it's not
hopefully
perfect,
people can understand it. Even if they don't agree, they can understand. And a lot of that comes down to they've read other books. So basically, if it's all a comparison game, I've not read every book in the world. People have read things I have not read, obviously, vice versa. And so someone can read, say, like, I haven't read Lonesome Dove, but when someone's like, when I go, hey, I really love the friendship between Frodo and Sam. This character interaction was really great to me, and it's one of the best I've read.
Yeah.
And someone goes, come on, it's not better than Lonesome Dove. It's like,
or,
and
hey,
like, that means
have you read Lies of Loch Lamora? I mean, come on, look at the friendship in there. Or, look at Sea of Red Sky.
Okay,
Red Seas under the red skies.
But I haven't read Lonesome Dove, and so I can't make that comparison. It's totally possible that when I do, I will make the comparison and go, oh, actually, that does put things in more context, where my opinions will change the more I compare and contrast other things. Like, I've noticed that just as I started reading and started marking it down, my opinions change on the books because I came across better examples.
Or worse examples.
Or
maybe one day.
Strong opinions where I'm going like, you know what? Maybe I judged you too harshly.
Maybe one day art becomes so hyper modernized that instead of just square and circle in the middle, it just becomes air. The air is art because they did this in the air. And that's art because the motion they did there and it created the art piece. And then you'll look back.
Don't give them ideas.
Actually, I'm going to sell that. So that right there, selling online to you right now. So maybe you'll look back and go, I think I judged the circle too harshly. And by the way, I don't like modern art. I'm not saying that in that regard. But what I mean is I think the word, maybe the framing you had earlier in the episode of it, that modern art being objectively bad art. I think it's subjectively universal. You can make the argument of like that modern art is bad versus the rest of it, because I also look at a bunch of rules, all the things that I choose to like what makes art good. Modern art hits none of that. Absolutely none of that. But how do I get there? Based on my premises and based on subjective universal premises that we can all agree on. For the most part, there's exceptions. But you were going to say something there.
I'm thinking back to specifically modern art thing and something we haven't really addressed as much. It comes
the elephant in the room.
Yeah,
the sexual tension.
No.
Oh,
wasn't gonna address that one. No.
Okay.
Thank you. You did it for me.
Yep. Go on. All right.
Leave that there.
What were you saying?
Skill. Basically, can this be repeated? Can it be done again? Why do we value Michael Jackson's music? Because he was the king of pop. No one's better than him. He is the best that ever was. Like, he's the greatest. If there were 10 other people as good as Michael Jackson, he would no longer be the king. That's the problem. So when you look at modern art, the disgust that comes from it is going like with the certain knowledge that I can do exactly what that person did.
Oh, that's definitely a part I look at as well of why I don't like it.
Yeah. I'm looking at that and going like, my 5-year-old can do the exact same thing. And that takes away a lot of its value.
Oh, definitely.
Now, hey, people, the immediate comment back to that is computers. I take a copy of the Mona Lisa, a computer can make a photocopy of it, and like it's exactly the same. Mm-hmm. Do I devalue the Mona Lisa by making a copy? I don't know. There is a sense of, hey, the original. And then that loops back to my history, my art history professor saying like, haha, there you go. See, it's the original that matters. And so,
well, here's
back around.
Maybe something to help you with that too is so the Mona Lisa was the first, and the novelty matters. And actually, in The Way of Kings, talks about this. Wit talks about this in The Way of Kings. This is not a spoiler to the book. It's just Wit talks about novelty and why that is a valuable thing. And I think he was talking about story for art or just the new and why people value things in general. But talking about replication from a computer does take away from the skill portion you were talking about, because you were saying specifically the skill to create the Mona Lisa. Now, you could say the skill of the computer. That's impressive. The computer can replicate things. The skill to create that computer took the human creativity, because going back to the definition, it's the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination. So you could say, wow, you created a computer that can do that. So, for example, chess. I like to use this example, but when chess computers started to beat humans. Mm-hmm. So it's the skillful person is Magnus Carlsen, the best chess player in the world. And the GOAT to me. I mean, you could also say someone like Kasparov is, but you look at these greats. Now, the skill of the computer is more the skill of the engineers or just the people that created the computer rather than the artwork, the chessboard itself, or the painting itself. Maybe that can help with your point there.
Somewhat. It's
the one time I try to help you. You know what? No, I'm gonna take.
You're close on it.
Yeah.
It's maybe that's actually something to think about. Is will computers creating art devalue human skill, or will it just raise the bar? Where now
people, we come mentats.
For people to be recognized, they have to be a certain level of skill. Where maybe before, like, if everyone is at a lower level of skill, it doesn't take much to rise above. Versus now, if everyone's pretty good, it takes a lot more to get above.
That's exactly what happened in chess, where the computers got so good, where it actually taught humans how to be better at chess.
Yeah, and maybe then, like, now with art, with computer animation, a lot of computer assistance to art.
Yeah.
I believe that artists have more tools to become better at their profession and better at their skill. And so maybe just that happening means there's more good artists. And so the qualities of making a great artist are just harder to achieve. There's more of them.
That could be the case. That could be the case, because when you were talking about Michael Jackson, and saying he was just one of a kind, no one else had his bravado. He had the dance, he had the song, he had the beats, he had the
everything.
Yeah,
he is the king of music.
All music. Yeah,
that's a harder argument, but close.
Pretty much, he's in that category though. You can argue
his level of skill and mastery of music. Music and performance. I mean, that's why he's the king of pop, is because he could dance, he could do the show, he did the sing, everything. But
that's another point we didn't touch on with art, because even something like a sports player, basketball player, football player, when you talk about someone in the GOAT conversation, LeBron or MJ, Tom Brady or Tom Brady, whoever you're talking about in sports, it's an artwork of some kind. It's using human creativity or skill in some way to have a great performance.
I think
do something great.
That's what we're kind of getting around. Our disdain for it is the lack of skill, and how much does skill go into a piece of artwork, and how much we value it.
Yeah, because
modern art kind of takes the stance that originality and interpretation is all that matters. Skill doesn't actually matter.
Despite skill,
it's actually more the consequentialist argument. I think modern art is consequentialism.
That's what we've come to.
There we go. Because it's the outcome that matters. That's what my art professor is trying to get across to me is
who cares about the input? The output's all that matters.
Who cares what they did to actually make the art piece? What matters is how someone felt. Did someone buy it? Did someone value it? Ultimately, the outcome. They were the first to do something. And so it's valuable. It's art versus a more deontological. God, I can't even say words right. But
deontological,
moral consequential, a consequentialist, whatever. But I value things in their process. The inputs matter. Good is good. Good acts make good results. No bad act can make a good result. And bad acts can make, just because. So it's the idea of you do a terrible thing, but the outcome was still. If the outcome was good, then it's like, well, I guess that's a good action. No, I don't agree.
Well, like Hitler and his art. I mean, going to a thing of he's a horrible person, but created a painting that he draws better than I can.
He's a pretty good artist.
I mean,
it's not bad.
Being serious.
Not good enough to art school. Not good enough.
Good enough to beat me, though. But it's someone that's that evil. Or you look at the extreme of a bad actor or someone who has bad intentions in their art, whatever it might be. Can they still create good art? Is that because that goes against what you're saying in a lot of this? Like, try to pinpoint what you're getting at here, because I think you're ruffling with an idea. Maybe we can carve that into something better.
There's just something about the outcome is not the only thing that matters. It's the process. And it's all of the input matters as well. It's not just how it's received, it's how it was done. And so just because somebody values it doesn't mean it's inherently valuable.
So taking the beauty in the eye of the beholder, do you think that there needs to be a perceiver in order for the art to be valuable? Like, let's say humans don't exist, only animals, and there's an artwork that exists. Is that beautiful despite there not being humans? Or do you need the eyes of the universe to look out into the galaxy and say, hey, I'm able to interpret this world, I'm able to interpret beauty because I exist? Or is it despite humanity itself and beauty exists regardless?
I personally, and there's no actual facts to this, but I personally
no objective answer.
There's no objective answer to us, but personally I believe beauty does exist with or without humans.
As art exists, as good art exists as well.
That I can look upon a beautiful landscape, I can look at a sunrise, and I do not make it beautiful for my witnessing it. It is beautiful on its own, and I am just a witness. I am recognizing its beauty. I'm not making it beautiful.
You have the privilege of even being there to experience it.
If I'm not there, that sunset is still beautiful.
The lesser way of saying that is that sunset slaps.
That sunset slaps.
Like that sunset's like a 10 out of 10 on the Rambler rating, right?
But that's kind of my thought on it. And if something can exist, something of value can exist without us witnessing it, it's not just necessarily the outcome that matters.
And hey, that sunset that you're talking about, through billions of years, that sun had to form, and our Earth had to compose itself in a way so that the sun could hit through the clouds at that certain precise moment. And it took a lot of time, the originality of, or at least the skill of the sun and the skill of the earth to create that beautiful sunset. You'd say it's so beautiful to you because it cannot be replicated so easily. That's taken billions upon billions of years to make that sunset slap, right?
Honestly, yeah. I mean, hey, if the sky always looked like that, would it be as valuable? Possibly not, but it could still be just as beautiful. But I don't know. That's the thing. I just believe that things are beautiful without me witnessing it. And so when I apply that to a larger standard of, does beauty exist without an observer? Personally, I think so. It's in our recognition of it. So it's rather than humans make things beautiful by observing it, I think we recognize its beauty.
So let me ask you this. If you were given 2 copies of the Mona Lisa, or if you were given 2 copies of the same thing, could you distinguish which one was more beautiful? If one took the skill and everything to make that, the other one was a computer-generated image. What differentiates those for you, and how do you qualm with that?
Well, the beauty would be equal in my understanding. My recognition would be equally beautiful because that's all the knowledge I have. Again, the truth out there is that if one of them is the original and I don't know,
right,
that exists outside of my personal opinion. That one is the most beautiful. It's the original. It's special in that way.
Yeah.
Just because I can't see it doesn't mean it's not true. So to me, it's a kind of a flaw in the whole perceiver being true, right? You get what I mean? Of just because I'm like, oh, that one's more beautiful. It's like, well, you're wrong because it wasn't the original.
The original one took the skill and took the time. And
This one was the photocopy.
The things you subjectively value of like, hey, what makes good art is this plus this plus this plus this. That subjective universality is what makes that beautiful.
And thing is, they can both be beautiful. The copy is still beautiful. It's just what's more valuable is the original. Original is just more valuable to people. But
damn, is friendship beautiful?
Our friendship isn't, but others have been.
Others
we can work.
Have been. You have no friends right now in the past tense.
They've been beautiful. They could be beautiful again.
They're
blossom. Right now. They serve.
I kind of want to get, I mean, this was a fun topic for me.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do another one like this, please.
Maybe with one of my other friends. That'd be better. One that doesn't make me do this.
Rate this episode out of 10. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This was a cool discussion for us. I actually do want to touch on something else because I think there's more to be said here. And
also, someone please correct me in the comments of what I'm actually getting at. Consequentialism versus something else. I'll probably look it up later, but
we'll find out.
Correct me down in the comments.
Also, let us know what you think about this whole conversation: subjectivity versus objectivity in art, and other topics we could talk about like this. And I want to revisit this someday because thinking new thoughts, and we're just talking about this for the first time in a detailed conversation. This was cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye y'all.